almost forgot to record the episode. I don't want to do that again. So I'm going to start over. Forgiveness of the self is today's lecture. And I want to talk about forgiveness in a couple of different ways. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is how much anger there is surrounding the topic of forgiveness. People get mad when you ask them to forgive someone else. People get really mad when you forgive them if they don't feel like they've done anything wrong. And people get extra super mad when they haven't forgiven themselves for something and you try to tell them that's a good idea. So a lot of anger surrounding the topic of forgiveness. And I think that makes perfect sense, because you don't forgive people without transgression. You're just there. You know, it's a normal day. Forgiveness isn't a thing that is a one-size-fits-all solution, like everything else that we've covered in this. It's not yes or no. It's when and how much, which means there are times when forgiveness is earned. And usually, if that is done properly, the request is something within the other person's power that they can do to make things right. So that is proper forgiveness. So if somebody says, I'm not going to forgive you when there's nothing you can do, it's their fault. That's number one. Forgiveness is a negotiation like anything else. And if somebody says they don't want to play with you, no matter how much you offer to do, then you don't get to have forgiveness from them. So that's the one thing. The other thing is that person will not be a good person for you to cooperate with in the future. If somebody has not forgiven you for something, do not enter into a partnership with them. Do not enter into a marriage with them. Do not enter into a relationship with them. Do not work for them. Do not have them work for you. Because a lack of forgiveness is at the root of everything that eventually fails, or a very large percentage of it. And Tony's got his hand up. What's up, brother?
Are we defining forgiveness as not holding a past indiscretion against someone's future, maybe? Usually when I hear forgive, people try to say forgive and forget, or forgive and not forget. And
that's a flight response from what forgiveness is supposed to do. So I'm going to forgive you, except I'm going to keep all of the anger that I had.
And so the question is, how are we defining forgiveness?
So the way that I'm defining forgiveness is the willingness.
We always start with definitions.
Yes. Forgiveness is the willingness to remove bias against a person outside of their current actions. So that's a very
Does current mean past as well?
What that means is you are going to observe a person's actions and weigh that against all of the information without skewing the information that you have in any direction based on past experience. Now, you may have questions. And this is where the rubber hits the road and why forgiveness matters. Forgiveness is removing the permission you gave yourself to hate somebody. So you have to set a limitation on your own hate if forgiveness is possible, which is why it fails more than it does. Because people, well, they love to hate sometimes. They love the action of hatred. And it's easy to find. You go to any large crowd where something is wrong and a bunch of people are agreeing that something is wrong, and tell me there's not hatred in that crowd. Now, maybe that hatred is pointing in a useful direction. Good example of a thing that I think could use a large crowd of people hating it at the same time is the decision to let those kids stay with that gunman for 40 minutes or an hour. I can hate that. And the more people that hate that, and only that, at the same time, the less likely it will be to happen in the future. But where that fails is when that permission to hate that outcome spills over into permission to hate everybody who disagree with you about what needs to be done. That's permission to hate people who don't agree with you. That's a very different thing. That's the opposite of cooperation. And things that don't cooperate die alone. That's nature. Your body, when it stops cooperating with itself, dies. You stop cooperating with others, you'll die alone. And you won't even be able to be there for you, because that's how bodies work. One of the pieces is going to fail. That's going to be an important one someday. And maybe your lungs or your heart, or you get a blood vessel that gets blocked and you have a stroke. Or maybe some air gets in there and it's an aneurysm, or maybe it's an embolism, or who knows? It's going to happen to all of us. So if your own body can't handle a lack of cooperation and survive, then how much hope do you have? Unless your life's going perfectly well. That's always my caveat here. I never talk to anybody whose life is going perfectly well. I don't talk to people who are happy about their situation. They have it figured out. I'm learning from them. The people who aren't fighting, the people who love their neighbors, the people who can get along with people who have different thoughts. Those people have things to teach. They're leading a happy life. From a survival standpoint, it is beneficial to be respected and well-liked in your community. Oh, I don't care if anybody likes me. Well, there's no danger of that, fuckhead. They already don't like you. You're just saying it's okay. If you really want me to believe you, go find people who like you and intentionally piss them off for no reason. Or let someone else go and find the people who still like you and piss them off. Turn them against you. And then see if you still don't care. That's the weakest rationalization ever. I don't care if people like me. There's no danger of that. It's also the safest thing you've ever said, because they don't. Anyone with that attitude, well, shouldn't be upset if I say that about them, because they don't care, right? How dare that guy make fun of me? Oh, I don't care if he doesn't like me. We should be on good terms. So is it hypocrite or liar? I would accept self-delusion as long as you update that over time. That's the kindest response. The rest of them just get worse. Tony, go ahead. I hit a good stopping point.
I was thinking about, gosh, where was it? Okay, so we were talking about delusions, lying to self, forgiveness, others. Yeah, I lost it, but that's okay. I was thinking about my daughter who needs to pick up her crayons.
Okay. All right. So forgiveness, right? It's a hot button issue. So here's the thing. If you don't want forgiveness or you don't care about forgiveness, then pick a different lecture. Because this one says a thing about forgiveness that I am saying is also said about you. When I use the word you, I'm talking about people who don't forgive and people who do forgive. So if you are not either of those people, obviously this lecture wouldn't apply. And if you are only forgive, or if you only don't forgive, well, then half this lecture is going to make sense and the other half is going to be nonsense. Now, for guys like me who struggle with this concept and believe that forgiving other people has an effect on you, personally when you do it. And that's not a nonsense phrase. That can be medically measured. It has been medically measured. Blood pressure, stress, cortisol, neuroepinephrine, all of these things, oxytocin, serotonin and dopamine, all of these things are tied up into the process of forgiveness before and after. So when I talk about forgiveness, there's a reason it's one of the last lectures, because forgiveness uses a lot of different mental parts, or it can. And the reason to make it use all of those mental parts is maybe right now it's an either or decision. And that either or is too big. So you don't do it because it's the safer bet to do nothing. But the only reason to do that is because you didn't want to lose something good while you were trying to do something else that was good. If you're not trying to do anything good, then you should expect what happens. That's all I have to say about that. But when it comes to trying to do the right thing, if you don't forgive somebody because you're not sure how you can do it and still have a good life, that's what the rest of these chapters in this lecture series kind of lay the groundwork for. And most of those are going to be found in the fallacies and bias section. Because if you remember the memory lecture, your memory has implicit memory, things that you just know. And that can be reprogrammed by traumatic events. And you just know that that thing is traumatic. So if somebody hurts you, and you have memories with that person, and you remove that person and all shreds of love you have for that person, going backwards in time, which is the silly part of it, is when you retroactively rewrite history about an emotion that you knowingly felt, you do damage to your memory, because your memory is not sharp when it comes to trauma. It's another thing that's been physically proven, and they've measured that from here to infinity. So the doctors have already done the heavy lifting on that as far as I'm concerned. You hurt someone else when you don't forgive them. That's the idea. That's the belief. No, that person doesn't deserve my forgiveness. That person isn't in the room with you. Unless that person has a comm badge and a video link that is constantly tied to your behavior 24/7, everything that you carry about that person, including your stubbornness about forgiveness, lives in you. It doesn't live in them. They don't care. My wife just messaged me. So that's the first thing about forgiveness, is hating somebody is an internal process. It lives in your brain. It affects you. They don't feel it. In fact, if they don't like you, because you won't forgive them, or because maybe they don't deserve to be forgiven and you're holding on to that, they might even be glad that it bothers you all day. Because usually a lack of forgiveness goes in two directions. And who's to say that it's appropriate? But both people will say that they're right. I dare you to find a story where two people won't forgive each other and one of them says, you know what, I was wrong. It doesn't happen that way. Everybody digs in. No, I'm not going to change my mind. I'm not going to do this. That person hurt me. I'm never going to trust them again. All right, fine. What are they going to want to do with you? Why should that surprise you? That's what you want, isn't it? Unless you don't want that. Maybe you really want to punish them. You want them to hurt the way that you did. So what do? You imagine hurting the way that you hurt. And what do? You make yourself hurt. Stop hitting yourself. That's the joke I like to tell with hate and forgiveness. Hatred is not a thing to carry around. We covered that in the last lecture. Hatred is a thing to pick up and bust through and put down as soon as you can. It is a blunt object, and it's destructive. And it's meant to be destructive. And sometimes destruction is the right answer when something in front of you is about to destroy something else. You would want to destroy something that was about to cause a mass extinction of human beings, for example. If you could destroy what was about to kill 1 million humans, and afterwards, nothing else happened except you destroyed that thing, well, that's a good thing. If your goal is to have more humans not die. But what are you going to do then? Are you going to hate that you had to do that for the rest of your life? You're going to destroy yourself because it's the same weapon. So that's the thing. When something is a weapon, it can also hurt you too. And forgiveness is poorly understood as a weapon. It's also poorly understood as a transaction. Because people who talk about that, people who talk about why they won't forgive, are really talking about what they think forgiveness is. And what they think will happen to them if they stop thinking that. I can't forgive them because they'll take advantage of me again. Why? Did you get stupid all of a sudden too? Like, do you have to let them walk all over you? Did your brain cell go away with your capacity to not harbor hatred against a person who did something bad to you? If those two qualities are linked in your brain forever, then forgiveness is not for you. You should focus very hard on never letting anybody piss you off. See how well that goes. You know who the first person you're going to be mad at? Yourself, because it's not going to work. And if you really dug in and you're extra stupid, because that's the only group of people I'm talking about here. So I'm only talking about the exceptionally stupid. So if you're outside of the group of exceptionally stupid people, I'm not talking about you. But if you're exceptionally stupid and stubborn and believe that forgiveness is a sucker's bet, you are not going to be able to forgive yourself for doing it wrong. Blame everyone else. And you know what happens when you blame other people for stuff? Well, a couple things happen, but I'll tell you what eventually happens. If you blame enough people over a long enough period of time, people stop coming to you. Your phone goes quiet. You don't get invited to things. Nobody reaches out. When you reach out, nobody responds. You don't get commitment from people for participation. Things that you need will not get done. Why? Because fuck that guy is why. That's a thing kids learn on the playground. Fuck that guy. I don't like to play with him. And we all went to school with one of those kids. And if you follow that kid that got excluded through high school, they generally don't turn out well either. Or if they do, it's much later in life. They get sorted out. So that's one reason. But that was only to help the exceptionally stupid people. What about everyone else? I got to go back, right? Well, thankfully, the answers get better the higher up the intellect chain that you go. So if you're waiting for the really, really smart answers, well, you're going to have to wait just a little bit longer because I'm starting at the bottom and working my way up. So the next one is, I just don't think I could ever trust that person again. But what do trust and forgiveness have to do with each other? You can trust a person to be who they are. If you want them to be something else and they won't, and that makes you angry, well, that's a forgiveness problem. That's not a trust problem. That's actually a tyranny problem. That's a lack of perspective problem on your part. You didn't map that person right. And the answer is obvious in front of you. Why? Because they ruined your image of them so thoroughly that you can never go back. Made you feel dumb. So the first group of people was the exceptionally stupid people who are legitimately stupid. This group is the group of well-intentioned people who were made to feel stupid by being confronted with something they didn't have right. Well, fair enough. Who knows everything? Nobody knows everything. There's too much information. There are things that are unknowable to some people. If Tony clips his nails in the bathroom and they flush down the toilet, it is impossible for a man in Nigeria to know that this event happened, how many toenails there were, and how much water was displaced while they were flushed down. And why would he want to know that? Number one. But number two is, even if he did, so yeah, that's the whole thing. Well, I wouldn't want to know that anyways. Well, you're giving yourself way too much credit to think that you had a choice. Wow, that's really big of you to say that you wouldn't want to know a thing that would be impossible for you to accomplish. Great job. No, I wouldn't want to eat 1,000 hamburgers. You know why I can't do that? Because 1,000 isn't a number. It's impossible. I could eat 10 100 packs of hamburgers over time, but 1,000, that's just nonsense. That's nonsense, especially in hamburger terms, especially for one man. So don't confuse what you'd want to do and what you are able to do, because that is how you give yourself credit for not doing something that you can't do. And that is a sucker's trade, because it makes you feel capable when you're not. So I would never forgive that person. I don't think you can. You couldn't do it if you wanted to. You don't know how. And here's the reason I say that. Because if you could, you'd know the difference of how it feels before and after, and you would work very hard to make sure that that was done right without damaging your future, which is possible. So that's the next phase. So this is only people who have been fooled, right? People who have been betrayed, people who have thought one thing was true about a person and they felt foolish and hurt and betrayed because it turned out they were not. So that's the group of people I'm talking about this time. So if that's not you, great, because it gets easier. It's easier as you go up, because now it's less about what you, and here's how it gets easier. Your life is made difficult by the length of the list of things that you don't do. Yeah, a lot of people who feel like they do a lot of stuff don't like that one. I do this, and I do this, and I do this. Do you eat right and exercise? Well, hell no. Okay, you still have diabetes. It's got nothing to do with you doing this and this and this and this. You did all those things, great. Here's what you didn't do. You didn't avoid sugar. You didn't watch your weight. You didn't listen to the doctors when they said they were going to take your foot next year. What you won't do is way more impactful in your life than what you will. And here's why. That's not a mystic secret. That's not anything. Your life is the things that you do. So the more things that you don't do, the less life you can do. You have less tools. Not every tool is great for every job. Everyone knows that. If you only have 8 things that you're good at in the world, and those are the only 8 things you know how to do, and you don't do anything else, don't expect a life that cannot be constructed solely from those 8 things. Especially when 2 of those things are to destroy the price of what else it would take to do more. Well, you could do this and this and this. All you got to do is trust 3 people. Oh, hey. No, I don't trust nobody. That's how you get burned. I can't have that. better to just trust myself. Fine. You will be the only person who ever lets you down, and you will be alone in that because you don't share that with anybody. I dare you to say that is not a heavy burden without convincing me that you're not lying to yourself in the process. Because if you don't trust anybody, nobody can let you down. And if nobody lets you down, then either you never let yourself down either, or you're the only person who lets you down when it counts. So, okay, well, let's move on. So that's the people who've been made to feel foolish. Let's talk about the people who want to forgive and they don't know how. All right, so this is different. The last group of people, they didn't want to forgive because, so they knew why they didn't want to forgive. So this is where you turn the corner. The previous groups of people knew why they didn't want the thing, which is a flight response, which means away from. So they say away from forgiveness, and here's why. Well, now we switch over to the other side. By the way, in the center of that moment, before away from and towards, is desire. If you remember the last lecture on emotional frequency, it goes, I forget the list, but it was desire was right in the middle of anger and fear. And so in the center of all of this, before you start going in one direction or the other, is the desire to forgive. So we're moving up the chain from negative frequency to positive frequency. I'm paraphrasing a few of the steps. But at the absolute middle, the tipping point, the balance point, I want to forgive you, or I don't want to forgive you. And if you strip those words away, want and forgive are the only ones that really can be observed in a vacuum, because the other ones are direction. To or don't, right? That makes it one or the other. Want and forgive. There's a desire about forgiveness. But what way does it go? Where do you want it to go? Do you recognize that you have a choice? That's the uncertainty part. That's where you don't know. And I'll tell you what, if you don't want to forgive somebody, and if you don't know that you should forgive somebody, you are doing better than the person who knows they don't want to forgive somebody. Being uncertain about something that is complicated is a lot smarter than being certain about something, especially when your something that you want is to keep this deadly virus alive in your heart. Because when we go up the chain now, so the stupid people again, which is the only people I'm talking about below this, the people who feel stupid and the people who are stupid, they won't agree with this until I explain it. So I understand that reaction right now, which is why once you get to the list of people who are willing to try a thing, well, that's when you can figure the thing out. They're going to fuck around with forgiveness and find out how it works. So maybe you start your life and you want to forgive people. Like that's your desire. So now we're talking about people who want to forgive people, people who don't want to be mad. All right. So if you're a person who wants to be mad, the last part of the conversation was about you. This is a different part of the conversation. And if these people are suckers, well then all the better for you, I guess. Less competition. Less people to think poorly of you, even though you won't care. Because they'll forgive you for being an asshole. I'm thankful for that, by the way. Because there would be no hope for assholes without forgiveness. Do you understand that not everyone who's an asshole wants to be one? Every person who's an asshole doesn't know how they are one. They would change it if they knew how. Not all of them. Some of them. Some of them don't like it that whenever their mouth opens up, people get mad. Their thought process is offensive somehow. And people just say, oh, that's that guy. I don't want to mess with him. So before you get into the decisions about who is what, you have to understand what a person's limitations are and how happy they are with those limitations and what tools they have to try and change those limitations. So again, the forgiveness, a lack of forgiveness, is a flight response from judgment. Is anyone noticing a theme in this entire lecture series? Everything runs from free will. Everything tries to avoid personal responsibility for choice. And anybody who understands responsibility understands that power and responsibility are the same thing. So if you run from responsibility, understand that you also run from power. And if you shouldn't be trusted with power, you should run far from responsibility. And if you try to take responsibility, but you run from consequences, or if you try to take power, but you run from responsibility, people who are wise should keep power and responsibility from you, because you will hurt yourself and others. And you'll think you're doing a good job, and everyone else will be wrong. And once they say that you're wrong, you won't forgive them. And that's not a road anyone wants to go down. So they just avoid the whole thing by saying, we're not going to play with that person because it always ends poorly. Well, every little thing sets that guy off, and there's no going back. He's bringing up the same thing from 5 years ago. How many times do I got to apologize for that? I'll give you the right answer. You have to apologize once and mean it. And then, tied to that apology, whether that apology is accepted or not, comes your promise to not do the same thing again. That is what needs to be judged. Like, I think that this is a great example for the N-word. I was watching a TV show the other day, and it was Paper Tiger. So it's a comedy kung fu movie, which was kind of serious. And it was three guys, and it was a white guy, an Asian guy, and a black guy. And they were the team for the movie, and it was the whole thing. And it was all about the cultural differences and how they merged with Eastern culture and how they trained under the same martial arts guy and shared lessons and how they went. It was very beautifully done, actually, for a comedy. It was very well done. But there was a scene where these three guys go to these three kids who were disrespecting their master, and they were like taking pictures at his funeral, and we're going to say, this guy taught them kung fu. And that was a very dishonorable thing to do, to say that you were trained under somebody when they didn't even know who you were. So they went to these kids and said, all right, we challenge you to Bamo, which is a fight, like a real fight. And it's best of three, and whoever wins, they get the thing that they talk about. And they wanted them to get rid of the pictures and tell them some information about, their master that they didn't know. Well, before one of the fights, one of the kids just starts calling the other guy the N-word. And the two other guys are like holding him back. Like he wanted to just whoop his ass right then and there. And he ended up fighting that guy later, and it didn't end well for him. But after everybody got their ass kicked and the movie was at the next spot, the writers did an incredible thing. It was very nuanced. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? That's how it has to be. And here's what happened. The kid looked over, and he's got, blood coming off his face and everything. And he goes, hey, I'm sorry I called you that word. And the guy did nothing. No forgiveness, no reaction, no anything. But then, and I'm thinking, you know what? That's right. To that point, that's right. But then the kid says, it won't happen again. And the way that he said it was he's not going to call that guy that word. He had learned his lesson about using the N-word in anger. And he told the guy, I'm not going to do that again. And then the guy who was sitting next to him, he looks over at the kid and he gives him the nod. Like, all right, that's a thing. You were sorry. You said you were going to do something that's going to help. And I'm going to watch you. And I'm going to make sure you keep that promise. And as long as you keep that promise, then we're good. And I thought that was a beautiful moment because it is different. That is forgiveness. That person had had a lifetime of dealing with that word. They already understood what it meant to get that hatred from someone else and to get rid of it so that it doesn't live there, because they know it doesn't come from them. It can't be given, it can only be grown. So they had already done the process of pulling that from them. So the apology and the forgiveness meant nothing to that point. But they also meant that he wasn't going to stop listening because an apology was offered. If you are being apologized to and you don't want to hear it, you are getting in the way of things getting better. And if that reason is good enough, maybe that's wise. But that needs to be a last resort, because what you are doing is you cut that person out of your life forever, and they still are alive in the world, unless you do something worse, which I wouldn't recommend. They're going to go and do things again. And you know what they're going to have learned? It doesn't matter if I say I'm sorry, so why be sorry at all? Because their life continues after you tell them off. And they don't feel that heroic burst of energy for being told they're a bad guy, like the person who told the other person they were a bad guy does. That grinds them down and says, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, because when I try to do the right thing, which is harder, and I try to do the wrong thing, which is easier, I get treated like I did the wrong thing either way. So because it's all the same to you, and they might even add, because it's all the same to you people, unfairly, things don't get better. Because an apology and a promise to do better is worthless without the willingness to see it done. So that's a choice. So for the person who wants to forgive, you have to recognize what your choices are. Your choice is to let go of being better than the person that wronged you. Getting to be superior in ways that make it not matter how you treat them. That's the cost of forgiveness. Understanding a person as a person and understanding the choices that led to their decision does not mean that you agree with them. It means you know what's going on. Otherwise, you're a moron who's making up a story and pointing at a guy and just projecting all of your emotional baggage, which is why forgiveness of the self is the topic of this title. Why am I talking about forgiveness of others so much? It's the same damn thing, because the things you won't forgive about other people are the things you can't forgive about yourself. And the only reason you get mad is because they bring out the worst in you. That's one of them. Now, maybe there's a good reason. Somebody shot my friend in front of me. I hate that guy. I would hate what that guy did. Would I hang out with that guy at a Sunday barbecue? Probably not. Would I be upset if that guy got sentenced to life in jail? Probably not. If that person got sentenced to life and spent life in jail and they turned around and they actually became a productive member of their community, am I going to go to his house 15 years later and fuck it up? Am I going to be mad that there's less hatred in the world because he stopped putting it out? Am I going to be mad that everyone else didn't get their fair share? That's what withholding forgiveness is like.
That's what I feel like about student loans and people who say, I turned out okay. Did you? Did you really? I don't think you did.
What is it? 250 grand in debt for a communications degree? Liberal arts? I know that one's paying buku bucks these days. Let me take a quick break. I gotta take a quick bathroom break. It kind of snuck up on me.
It's all right. I think we've got at least half hour left here.
So that's the first part of the lecture, was all about forgiveness of others. Now I'm going to translate how that ties to forgiveness of the self and what happens when you do it and what your choices become. It's a hot second here.
All right.
All right. Okay. So let's talk about, I'm going to talk very briefly about the 5 stages of grief and how that ties into personal forgiveness, because it's the same damn thing. And people get stuck in the same spots. Something happens. It's a change, all right? A change happens. Say it's not a good one. You didn't see it coming. Well, the only difference between grief and a lack of forgiveness is you have nobody alive to blame. So if you have a problem with forgiveness, you are going to have a hell of a problem with grief, because you lose the one defense that you had, which was to cover it with so much anger that you don't feel it anymore. So let's talk about that. And this is a pop psychology thing, but there's a lot of truth to this. The denial. How dare you say I don't know how to forgive anybody? I'm as mad as I've ever been. Well, that's denial. I'm not being defensive. I'm not trying to disagree with everything that you say. I'm a great forgiver of men. But no, not those guys. No, it's different. It's not true. No, anger is easy, because that one goes right into the other. Is if you put out a bullshit lie like that, that is so obviously one-sided, that anybody who is taking you seriously will point it out. Well, if they point it out, then they get angry. Or they don't, but those are the choices. Get angry or don't. They could say, you know what, you're right. Or they could say, you know what you say doesn't matter. But that's not how grief works. That's not how forgiveness works. It's usually, why should I? What does it matter if I feel better? I just want to be pissed off at the thing that made me hurt, so it doesn't happen again. Problem is, that only works when something's in front of you and is about to go wrong. It doesn't work into the past, which is how everybody tries to use it. So what do? You end up being mad at a memory that made you feel bad. And you pay the emotional cost every time you relive that memory that way. There's different ways to have that memory. Somebody died unexpectedly, and I'll never forgive them for leaving me alone. There's one. Different kind of forgiveness. That one's tied to heartbreak. Just so mad that they could do that. I mean, it's a selfish way to love, but come on, who doesn't feel it when someone they love is gone, even if it's for a few days? You know? We are together with people because it helps us. Cooperation is a strength. Numerically, if two people are doing the same thing, their output will be twice as strong in the same direction. They're, of equal skill, and compared to one person of equal skill doing the same effort in the same direction. The people who are working together will get more done, and they will do a better job. And if there is a limited amount of success to be had, say a promotion, or I don't know, you name it, the people who work together the most effectively are going to get that. Well, the next one is bargaining. Well, I could feel better about it if they did that. And you know what? Maybe there's something there, because as you go up these steps, you start to get more useful. Denial isn't worth jack shit. That is you buying time to handle the reaction to your own reaction. You are not ready to have these thoughts, so you push them back, way back, like you're a damn cheerleader beating a drum. Don't cheer on your anger and lack of forgiveness. That's just an initial response to get you some time. You know what happens if you spend too much time on one thing? You get old without anything getting done. You want to see something sad? Find a miserable person at an assisted living home and ask them to tell you what was good about their life. That's the future of that individual who glorifies hating other people and hanging on to it forever. Just because it's a choice that can be made, just because it's a choice you can defend, doesn't mean it goes the same place that other choices go. Because if it did, then those people would be happy. Because other choices make people who don't forgive happy. Or other choices for people who do forgive things like that end up making those people happy. So you can't say it's all the same unless you're reducing your life to a thing that doesn't matter. Because then it is all the same. If your life doesn't matter, it is all the same. It's the same if you're a millionaire, it's the same if you jump off a bridge. And everything in between, which anybody with 2 cents in their head can look at and say, I don't care how you say that's right. Here's 1,000 ways why that's wrong. And if you can be right once and you can be wrong 1,000 times, and I weigh those things against each other, just because you have the bigger imagination about how little things matter because of the thing you say doesn't matter, well, that's another choice that you're not making compared to choices other people are. Your choice only appears big because it's the only one you have. There are women who have stories they like to tell about a certain subset of men who seem to have an enduring sense of wonder about the girth of their manhood. Those women who have perhaps seen more than one, maybe it's even 2, will know that that man is deluding himself because he doesn't know what big is, because he's only comparing it to himself. And the choices he has are, is it a cold day or not? That's about it. So you cannot talk about size until you have seen something different from the inside and outside. I've left that metaphor behind before that last sentence, by the way. So it was a perfectly clean sentence. Anyone who's trying to carry that metaphor longer than it should is living in the past, and they should stop now. So bargaining. Well, here's where the tipping point is, because certain kinds of grief are permanent, meaning the thing that caused it is not a thing to be repaired or undone. Okay? The thing that was priceless broke. It's not coming back. It is beyond repair. A person died. All right? They're not coming back. So now bargaining becomes a thing to look at. Why is there bargaining? Is there bargaining because maybe there's something that two people could come together and do to put this legitimately behind them? Maybe they've had a good relationship in the past, and this is one thing, a thing that was really bad. But maybe the desire is there. So what do? They talk about it. They share opinions. They share perspectives. That's a form of bargaining. So just because it's part of the nasty 5 stages of grief doesn't mean you should rush through it and that there's no wisdom there. It's there for a reason. Figure out why. And here's the answer. Here's the test, by the way, to see if you are properly using the stage of bargaining while you process your grief, because everybody gets there. If you are asked the question, what could help make this right? And your answer is nothing, then you are a terrible bargainer. And you do yourself no favors by glorifying that. I can't think of a possible way that two people could work together to fix this. Great. You just said that you're too unimaginative to do anything about the thing that's wrong and affects you. And maybe that's true, but that's not a virtue. That's a limitation. So bargaining, you're doing bargaining. Yeah, exactly. You're doing bargaining right when the answer is something that is not impossible. That is a good bargaining. If both people agree, then maybe there is a way to put it behind you. Hey, this thing was obviously wrong and I can see how it hurts you, and I'm going to do my best to fix the damage, even though I can't replace the damage. And I'm going to promise that in the future, if something like that comes up, this will never happen again, because I learned from the choices that were made and how they went wrong, and I don't want that to go wrong again. And then those two people might say, okay, if you keep your word and show me that you are committed to doing the things that you just said you were going to do, and I observe you over time, you don't do that thing anymore or anything even close to it, well, then it's done. And both people got what they wanted. Unless one of them wants to hate another person. That's why those people are the dumb ones at the bottom of the list. Because why would you trade a life with somebody who could do something with you versus a life where you are by yourself and you only have your pain and hatred of them and your lack of forgiveness to keep you warm? All right, so that's bargaining. Well, the next one is depression. Why do I say these get more useful when they go up? Because depression is the first step to accepting you're at fault. Now, you don't want to live in depression. When you live in depression, everything is your fault, and that's dumb, because everything can't possibly be your fault. There's other people in the world that aren't you, and you don't matter so little that things don't come from you and come back to you. So depression is a dehumanization of the self. Now, if that depression is to numb you so that you can't remember or care about what happened, even though you don't know that it's, you're not willing to let it go, you just carry it and stop feeling it. Well, everything that you could feel associated with that gets numbed as well. You don't get to have both, which is why the depression is the 4th stage. Because if you've done your bargaining properly, you can feel bad and see a thing get better over time. But if you're stupid with the bargaining phase and someone says, what would help you? Nothing. Well, you're going to make it to depression whether you want to or not. And what have you brought with you? Exactly what you wanted, which was nothing. because depression is a side effect of long-term anger. Because anger destroys the sense of self. So if your goal is to carry that anger all the way through this process, you can. And it will make you depressed. So what's the last one? Well, let me talk about the positive aspects of being depressed.
Acceptance.
It's a place you should visit. It's not a place you should live. Why should you visit there? Because if you have a healthy sense of self, maybe that healthy sense of self is steering you wrong. And if you have a healthy sense of self and your sense of self is diminished, you will know the difference. And you will be able to see what's been lost, which becomes a motivating factor to change, to attack the problem at its source. In this case, it would be to stop feeding the thing that is actively hurting you, which is the anger you won't let go of. Acceptance. Oh, that is a loaded gun right there, because people can accept anything. Just to throw a wild example out there, say that the government decided every person needs to get a medical injection, and the studies weren't released for it, and the safety wasn't fully tested, but they swore up and down it was good. A fair number of people would accept that. Whether that's wise or not, well, history tells that. I don't need to weigh in. We're talking about acceptance, not consequence. It's a different lecture. What will people accept? People will accept a lot. But it's not if they accept it. Acceptance is not the thing. Acceptance is not good or bad. Acceptance exists with potential, like everything else. What are you accepting? How much and why? When does it help you? When does it hurt you? I just accept that's the way the world's always going to be. Okay, great. If the world is great for you now, you will die in a world that you love. Hey, you could do worse. Everyone's going to die in the world. I would say out of the group of people who died, which is all of us, but people who die in a world that they love probably have a better shot of saying they had a decent life and that they're not miserable, that they wasted it. And they're not going to be glad when it's over. So acceptance by itself, just because it's the last step, doesn't mean you did it right. It means that there's no more help. It means you're on your own. Do you accept that there's nothing you can do? Or do you accept there is nothing that you know how to do that you will do? Or do you accept that you've done the best you can? Very different paths go through that one word. And none of those paths end well if the goal is to protect the anger. The anger. And so why would we protect the anger? So this is the last part about forgiveness of the self. All of that protects the anger. Every last one of them. And all of that is a flight response, a fear response for seeing how you're vulnerable and accepting how you're vulnerable. Because another person brought it out. Maybe they destroyed your trust. Maybe they cheated on you when you never thought that was possible. Maybe somebody you loved cleaned out your bank account or something and just stole all your money. Just out of the blue, right? Went from loving you to robbing you blind. You didn't see it. Maybe that happened. Or maybe you trusted somebody to keep a secret, something private, and they didn't, and they used it to hurt you. You told it to them in confidence. Well, all those things happen to everybody at some level or another. So the things that get revealed when the anger is stripped away are the reason that forgiveness of the self is important, because just because they're covered up with anger doesn't mean they're not there. The first one is you are not the most special person in the world. You are 1/7 billionth special. There is a limited amount of special to be divided up among human beings. You get 1/7 billionth of it. And to act like you deserve more than your share is wrong. And here's how you know why it's wrong, because everyone's going to fuck it up. You don't need to agree with it for it to be wrong. It's not even morally wrong. It's functionally wrong. How many people treat you like you're special, especially more special than them? How many people walk up to you and say, you know what? I had a life going on, but boy, you are just the bee's knees here, and I need to bend over backwards to make your life everything it can be. Because you're you. You're that one human being out of a billion who really counts. So you get what you want before everyone else. No. Now, that doesn't stop people from trying. There's easily a few billion of those. I used to be one of them. I was real bad at that. I had a good example of how to do that when I was very young. So I learned from the best about how to think I was so special that nobody else mattered. And I learned how to get away with it if you are strategic and loud about how unkind you are. Why? Because people are willing to accept things they shouldn't. I exploited the system, but what I couldn't exploit was causality. That anger was in there, and it chipped away at my sense of self. And I got worse with age. So why get rid of the anger? The first thing it does is it puts you in proper perspective with the rest of the world. And when you have proper perspective, expectations are a part of that. What is reasonable to expect? You should expect what everyone else gets. To every person who is not you, you are someone else. So that's the first thing. You can't be special and angry at the same time. Very difficult thing to do. There's righteous anger. That's a different topic. That's somebody else. But if you are angry, personally offended, you have elevated your thing above the thing that wants to remove it or move it. So there's a time and a place to do that. This person is harming another person in front of me. Yeah, I am more special than them because I want to end their desire to lose life and to make that happen as fast as possible. I've made a judgment against that person. But that judgment is not to protect me from appearing vulnerable. So if you want to know if anger is appropriate, you want to know a lack of forgiveness is appropriate, how far is the event into the past? That is the direct measurement for how appropriate it is to carry anger. If it happened today, maybe you should be angry for a while. Maybe you need to process why. If it happened a week ago, maybe it still feels a little raw. If it happened before you were alive, go fuck yourself. Everybody who wronged you is dead. The people who are left are the ones who can help. That's where the choice is. Do you want to be special? Do you want to be angry? Or do you want to appear vulnerable and weak, like you can't fix this on your own? How do you get there? Well, you have to understand it. And you can't understand a thing if you're not willing to empathize with it. You only have a caricature of it. So the point is, without forgiveness, perspective isn't possible because anger is a narrowing process. And we've covered that, and it just narrows perspective. So do I say that people need to give up their anger? I don't say people need to do anything. I only say what happens when they don't. I only say that a choice exists. And if anybody has studied any sort of probability and statistics, they will know what a bell curve means. Some people are going to choose one way. A bunch of people are going to choose the thing that's the most common. And a Another group of people is going to choose a thing that's uncommon and everything in between on a scale. We invented that scale to describe that phenomenon. So I don't tell people what to do because I don't care. I understand all of you. I understand why you'd want to carry anger. I also understand what that does. I understand why you are a terrific salesman for a lack of forgiveness. I also know that you'll die angry. If you're lucky, there'll be another person in the room who's not paid medical help. If you're lucky, they'll find you before you get all bloated and smell because nobody comes to your house. And the only reason they came this time wasn't because they cared about you. It was because the smell was starting to become a problem. So even in death, they couldn't wait to get rid of what was left, even though you're not alive enough to push it around. I know what happens when you let go of hate. And I know what happens when you can remember a person doing a bad thing and not hating them for it. Because it's very different to go into the future with knowledge than it is with emotion. Emotions are not things that are constant over time. The smartest emotion in the room is the right emotion to have. The right emotion yesterday is not the right emotion today, unless today is exactly like yesterday. So everybody who tries to make the past, everyone who tries to make the future into the past is guaranteed disappointment. And that is exactly what happens when forgiveness is withheld. I want it to go back to the way things were. That's what you want. Can you do it? No, I can't do it. No one can. You gonna feel miserable about it? Yeah. Why? Because nothing can change it. Maybe nothing can change what happened, but that doesn't mean you can't change your attitude. That's not fixed unless you got a hard head. The Bible had a word for people like that: hardened heart and stiff-necked. Those people were not painted favorably in the Bible. They were disagreeable for the sake of being disagreeable. They were disagreeable for the sake of not being wrong. It's a stupid way to live your life. If your goal is to never be wrong, you failed. Because everybody's wrong about something. How dare you, Tom? Oh, no. Oh, no, too bad. I forgive you. Why? Because forgiveness is a lot of things. I don't condone your lifestyle. I don't condone your choices. I'm not you. I don't need to agree with you. I don't need you to agree with me. I don't give a shit if my ideas make no sense. I prefer it if my ideas are enjoyed, but that's because everybody likes it when things that they make are enjoyed. That's like an artist's type thing. But my life and nobody's life is tied to the words and thoughts in another person's head beyond the connections they say need to matter tomorrow. So to tie up this chapter, this lecture, forgiveness of the self, the only reason you should forgive yourself, even if all of the other reasons are dumb, is because it's the only way to understand the parts of you that need to get better. And if you can recognize where you were wrong or where you failed, and you can do that honestly without any bitterness, if there's no discussed sensitivity for vulnerability, if there's no discussed sensitivity for a moment of stupidity, there's no discussed sensitivity for being misled and acting like it was true to the detriment of other people, you can look at those parts of yourself. You can figure out which ones are hurting you, which ones you're keeping alive. Then you can let them go. So the only person who shouldn't forgive themselves is the person who feels like they personally have not suffered enough to learn why it's a bad choice. And those people deserve as much pain as they can give themselves, according to them. And when that gets full, and when it gets unbearable, if the self still can't look outward, it's going to spill over to everyone else. And that's how you know somebody doesn't understand forgiveness, is they don't even know how it works. And God help you if you're the one who asks them to try. All right, that's my lecture on forgiveness of the self. A little bit condensed. I lost about 10 minutes, but I felt like I was on point. So we made it up with density.
We started with forgiveness from others.
Yep.
Forgiveness of others. Ooh. I think my kitchen table leg is stuck to the floor. All right, I think I've got pancakes or muffins or something else to make, and dinner's coming up soon. I will see you in the dojo. No questions. Forgiveness, one of my main things.
So
I can
how
vibe
did
with
I
it.
do compared to how you understand it? Because you said you put some time into this. Like, do we arrive at some of the same locations from different directions?
Yeah. 5 stages of grief were pretty on point. Anger, hatred. You talked before about there was a little disconnect between picking it up and putting it back down as soon as possible. Because I don't know that there's anything that can't be controlled to be properly wielded more often than just put down as soon as possible. Whether it's a strong and a lot of times when we were talking about emotions, I inserted the word uncontrolled emotions or something else, and that's just that's just stuff from previous things that help massage it to Tony's brain.
Yeah, because one of the things, and that's a good, and sometimes I forget that because I have done a ton of work to beat that part of my brain to act right, which is to know the difference between an emotion and a reaction. And a lot of the things I was talking about in this lecture were common reactions and how some of those reactions can be preserved over time. And so when a reaction is preserved over time, it usually doesn't go well. Does that clear that language up a little bit?
Yeah, it was all clear. I thought all yes.
I agree that it's a clearer way to present it, which is why I was upgrading it. But I can't know if it was an upgrade if you tell me, well, Tom, you just took it even further in the wrong direction. Because that was me double checking it. Like if I can get more precise and you still agree, that means we agree more precisely.
So what I heard was I added uncontrolled emotion and you added
Preserving reaction over time.
Yeah, reactions versus emotions, which remember everything's got like 6 trains with me.
Yeah.
That can fit half of them because we can very well attribute like it all fits. There's no reason I don't have to disagree with that. However, I don't think that's the only, reason or the only this or the only that. Also, is it possible to do that and not have that result? Also, does that still apply to me and Tom? Also,
that's how I view the utility. Is when that is useful, it is stable. When it's not useful, I keep it put away.
Yeah, I think I explained it to you months ago, like Elon Musk leaves on the tree.
Yeah. All right, well, I don't want to keep you from your very real parenting and baking responsibilities. I will be in touch with details and information about you, James, and the t-shirt thing. I'll put a nice design together as a rough draft. We can critique it. It's going to be a combination of heavy metal and the chakras.
Did I also see a study in the dojo going on? We were outlining something for 12 months or 12 sessions. Was it maybe the Hermetic principles?
The Hermetic principles. I didn't put that together. Maybe
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything, any of your projects or any.
His collected works, which by the way are pretty interesting. Ken's got some really good. Ken has some very healthy attitudes about what it means to hang on to anger and where it comes from. Like he really gets it at the source, and he's not gentle about attacking it at the root. And that's one of the things I've always thought was fun about him is he doesn't always attack the way that will cause a conflict to end, but I've never seen him really attack the wrong thing.
Yeah, I don't think we need each other. Like, I think we're both kind of good in our lanes and
You wouldn't want to
we
learn
don't
something,
intersect.
forget. Then you might understand each other. Can't have that. Might even
I
love
think we
each other.
both do. I think we both do.
You might even work together in ways that make your lives better.
You
Whoa,
think we haven't?
have you?
I thought so. We've commented on posts together.
So no, I'm talking, that's baby stuff. That's just knowing a guy. I'm
That's
talking
baby
about
stuff?
what you could
That doesn't
do
have
if
to
you
be
actually
baby stuff.
combine forces and work together on a goal. Like, yes, I could imagine great
Sounds
things.
like
with all of you,
you're
but I want to build
sounds
an empire with each of you.
sounds
Brilliant.
like an assumption of who I don't have around me already that could be so much better than that.
I'm just measuring your interactions with Kenny in terms of towards and away, and they're consistently away. I could be wrong about everything else. But there's usually a distancing that's associated with Ken. You measure that yourself. That's just what I've noticed. Doesn't mean it's the full picture. But I pay attention to that a lot. So double check my math.
I see no reason to align myself with any of his strong principles.
Then don't.
All the weak ones we're on board with, and all the weak ones can still get everything that we could do with the strong ones done if things were different, but they're not. We're both already strong in our ways and happy about that. And I don't think he's going to change for me, and I'm
No, I wouldn't want.
probably not, changing for him.
You learn if everybody in that room did what I do, I would be out of a job. Because I'll be the only person with all the pieces, the way the people who make those pieces understand them. Everyone else is just guessing. It gives me a competitive advantage of perspective. And I'd like to keep it that way for as long as possible because that puts me ahead. But I'll always use that advantage to try and help as many people as I can. So I'm using it wisely just because I'm getting ahead and I know that.
Specifically this time you said he wasn't gentle. And that to me sounded a whole lot like I could stack on all the stuff about Tom and Shadow in the lectures about how he's afraid to be gentle. That seems like what Tom would do. But for me, that's just fine. He's not gentle. He doesn't need to be gentle, but I don't want to work with him if he's not.
Do you know why he's not gentle? Do you know what about his perspective makes him the way that he is? Because that's where his interesting things live.
It sounds like you think I should. When my whole point here is that I
like interesting things. You don't have to like interesting things.
You think it's interesting, and
or
so we're
agree that what I
selling
think
it
is
or talking about it, but
the
it doesn't mean that I could perceive it that way or that I would choose to perceive it that way. The thing I brought up last time was that, I think what you said assumes I didn't have the people around me who are already better than that. You
so
don't.
It's not better or worse.
The question
Your shadow came out.
For the second time, I repeated it. You missed it the first time. Way to catch up, though.
Yeah.
It's all right. You said something. You said you wanted to build something with both of us. What
I build naturally is when I understand both of you, the way that you understand yourselves, which is different from how people understand each other. Understanding a person the way they understand themselves is a different calling, a different goal than understanding a person enough to interact with them. When I understand two people the way that they understand themselves, then I understand what those people would be capable of if their potential was combined. All that is saying is, I see this and this and this and this and this, and if you put this and this and this together, you could make this. It's no different from any other building process. But an accurate inventory of the tools and what gives them their power is how I do that. So it's kind of like the you and the James thing, where you're the crowd man and he's the sales closer, he's the draw. That's the types of potentials that I see. And everybody in that room has a potential that is 10,000 times greater than average in a single direction. So you guys are the special forces, AAA elite when it comes to the things you're good at. Which means if you take one person who's good at one thing, they will trounce everybody in that one thing. But they will be weak against the most average person who has their natural counter. Because that's just the way those things work. It's a paper, rock, scissors game. But when you have 3 or 4 or 5 people who are good at strategically very different things, and everyone knows how to recognize who the smartest person in the room is for that moment and knows how to follow their lead, then you have almost the Spartan phalanx, where the man next to you covers you from throat to groin, and you attack, and then you pull back and you defend them from throat to groin as they attack and pull back. But none of that works when everybody ranks rank and fights themselves. But the only way to understand which order to put them in is you need to understand everybody's understanding of their own tools. But that's my view, and that's my skill. I can't do half those things. I can do as much as I can because I know how to mentally cooperate some of the potentials I've
I
learned.
think that's my skill from the other perspective, because you think that you have to, that you'd be out of a job without doing it. And I think that I only have a job because other people do it or because of other people's inputs. I see everybody's potential and then let them work together the way that they best do by
But you let them?
seeing what I think they may not see in themselves if they don't see it yet. Like if somebody knows what their strengths are, or no, if somebody knows themselves already,
Mhm.
then they should be able to easily let me know what tools they want to work with, and then I can put them with somebody else.
What if the part of them that they don't know is how to share that information or to think it's relevant? What if they've never been on the other side of that coin? How would they know? Are they the person with the tiny dick who says it's large and then the girls all snicker behind their back? If that person makes a habit of doing the thing and they
Are
say
we
it's
talking
not for
about
me,
public things though?
what's that?
I thought we were talking about public things, the way a person lives or
Knowing
works,
and-
the way a
knowing
person
and
works.
judging
There
are
we go.
different.
Maybe that's a different works, how somebody works versus how somebody lives. Because I think that it's not hard to see how somebody works, and it's not hard to figure out how you work. And
I would
I don't
say if
think
you
that's the tough
understand
part.
how somebody works well enough, you will predict how they live.
And I think that's a possibility from your perspective of axes and angles, but that's about one of my 6 cars.
Well,
No reason
I
to
was gonna say,
disagree.
your ability to predict the actions the way that I do is not your ability. Like, it's
Why
mine.
not? Oh,
Well,
okay.
because I'm just saying, it's your specialty is different than mine. So you can comprehend the things that I
Right.
do, and I can comprehend the things you do, but I'll never understand what it's like to be you. I can only watch what you do and say, this is what's likely to happen based on how I understand it. And then some of those very basic measurements where if I do these 8 things and I never stray from that path, I do a decent enough impersonation of Tony to get 20% of his power. And hey, that's great, but I'll never beat Tony at Tony's game. The only way I can beat Tony is if I have 5 different games plus my own. I'm 100% Tom and I'm 20% everyone else. All of a sudden I am giving 200%. But that's the Tom approach. None of what I do is very great except for pattern recognition. That's all that I'm really, really good at. I'm a slow learner. It's difficult for me to get information unless it's a very specific way. It's difficult for me to use positive thought processes of rising polarity, meaning going from lower frequencies to higher. That's not my natural language of thought. I can do it very slowly, and the benefit is incredible just to be able to do that much. But for someone who it's a natural thing, they'll kick my ass around the block every time. So it's, do you play the game as it's written? Or do you understand the game so well that you can make it so you win every time? Which means the rules that you use are not going to be the rules everyone recognizes. Because that's the difference between someone who wins the game convincingly and someone doesn't. They understand the game so differently that their strategy doesn't make sense, which means it's unopposed. Everyone else has competition and sabotage and backbiting and security. But if nobody knows your strategy because it's so subtle and it's so far outside the box, you get the advantage of getting to work in complete autonomy. So the things that you build stay there until you come back to them. And that's why I like to learn everybody else's ways of thinking, is because everybody tied into the mess of themselves has the thing that they use to get over their biggest flaw. So everybody's superpower is their super weakness, which is you said. So by learning how everybody's superpowers work, I can learn how to spot the super weaknesses. And then when that little tiny thing gets in the way of my strategy, I can overcome that because I figured out how to make it work. So it's not that you don't have the strengths. And so when I say people have potential together, it's not that I say they don't have the strength. They do. They have potential because they have the strength they do. What they don't have is the ability to overcome weaknesses that they're not very on top of. And that's different for everybody. Like I've got 1,000 weaknesses. There's a million ways to beat me in a game of strategy. But the first thing you have to do is think of something I wouldn't think of or haven't thought of. And if you do that, you got a shot, same as everyone else. That's, I don't know, that's my view on strategy in general. So it's not about, do I have what I need? It's, do I have what I could have?
Yep, I feel similarly.
All right, Tony, I love you. I love working with you. We got 2 of these bad boys left.
All right. I'll see you in the dojo.
Good, brother.
Love you too.